We're good. Welcome, everybody. My name is Carla Faust. I am the past president of the Lodi Optimist Club here in town. Just a couple things to let you know about the Lodi Optimist Club. First off, thank you for being here today, students, Teresa and John Plummer. A couple things about the Optimist. We were established in 1967, and so this is our 55th year of being in service to our community. A couple of things that we do is we do a lot of fundraising. Recently here we held our Lodi Optimist Pig Roast out at the Menke Barn. When we raise money from these types of events and hit you up for tickets, please know that we in turn put that money back into our community for our youth. Namely, we contributed $10,000 to the stadium here at Lodi. We put $20,000 into the outdoor community pool that is used by so many people in the surrounding communities as well. Not to mention that we also donate our funds to the wrestling club, the cross-country ski team, the girls swim team, boys basketball, volleyball, girls basketball, the OSC charter school. So everything that we do, we try to put back into our community. And one of the things that we've done for more than 20 years is host a forum such as what we are doing today for our community and for our school. So we've partnered with the schools. We appreciate having the youth here. Please know that Bill Hopp is our moderator, and he will also encourage you to raise your hand and ask questions of the candidates here today. So we're pleased to have you here. I'd also like to acknowledge our board members that are present and not present here today. So our board members for the Lodi Optimist right now are Mr. Bill Hopp, who is our moderator for today's event. Diana Carls will be passing the mic around as a member. Al Bilsey is here today with us. Al Buddy, Chuck Redessel, Bob Gores, and Ann Groves Lloyd, plus Tyler Potter, our current sitting board. If anyone is interested in joining the Optimists, we of course welcome you to come join us as well for our monthly meetings, which are typically held on the first and third Wednesdays at Reach Out Lodi. So with that, to start our meetings, we always start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I will ask you to rise, remove your hats, face a flag, and state the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And with that, I will turn this over to Mr. Bill Hopp.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you to everyone who's here today attending the 42nd Assembly District Forum. I believe we have 4 different class sections here today. We're delighted that you're here, and we hope that you will be participating. And if we could get a quick show of hands of how many are eligible to vote. Wow. First-timers. That's terrific. And also, if each of the instructors could just please indicate what classes are here. Yes. Thank you. Great to have all of you here today, and thank you to the public also. One other bit of thank you. We'd like to thank our partners at the school, Jason, Marshall, and Tyler and Joe, for making the arrangements. It's very much appreciated and important. Thank you. Our format today is fairly straightforward. We will have our candidates make 2-minute opening statements, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to the audience questions. That's the bulk of the forum. And then the candidates will also have 2 minutes for closing statements to conclude the forum. I'd like to, at this time, welcome our candidates. To my immediate left is Teresa Valencia. Teresa is a Lodi resident, and she is representing the Democratic Party. And to my right, via virtual, is John Plummer. John is also a Lodi resident, and he is representing the Republican Party. Congratulations to both of you on rising to this level. They have to get through a primary process and being their party's representatives. So we'll begin the forum today with our 2-minute opening statements. John, you are first on alphabetically. We would ask you to begin, please. 2 minutes for your opening statement, sir.
Well, thank you, Bill. And I want to thank you for hosting this event and the Lodi High School and the Performing Arts Center for making this beautiful facility available today. I ran for office the first time 4 years ago to help people, and I haven't changed that. Whether I served on the town board or the county board, I've always run for office for the same reason. And I still love this job. I love helping people. So especially in the last 2 years, the constituent work has been extremely heavy with COVID and shutdowns, people losing their jobs, not being able to get through to DWD and get their unemployment. So we literally helped hundreds of people facilitate connections to DWD so they could make their house payments and rent payments. So it's important work, but when somebody calls our office, Bill, we don't ask them what party they belong to. We don't ask them whether they voted for me or not. They're our constituents, and that's our job, is to be a resource for them. So I really enjoy that part of the job. Making laws is another important part of what we do. I had 6 bills passed into law and signed by Governor Evers this session. One was passed unanimously in the Assembly, which was the Holocaust Education Bill. And I'm very proud of that, not only that it was passed unanimously, but the fact that my number 2 was a Democrat, Lisa Subak, who's always been a good friend of mine in the Assembly since I've been there, who's Jewish, and I knew she would want to be part of that bill, and I asked her, and she gladly jumped on board. So I had 2 opioid-related bills that I had passed and signed this session. One created a statewide database, and the other one provided immediate funding from the opioid litigation settlements to the county. So proud of the work we got done this session, and looking forward to hopefully returning in January.
Thank you, John. Teresa?
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I'm Teresa Valencia, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to the Optimist for sponsoring this. Thank you for the school for hosting this. I appreciate it. Getting some new civic-minded kids in here is wonderful. I really appreciate this opportunity to connect with all of you. I'd like to share what I believe in most and fight hard for on the Assembly. I'm a lifelong Lodian who cares about those of us in small towns and rural Wisconsin. I want to construct tax and spending policies that lift up working class families, farmers, small businesses, and veterans rather than giving handouts to big corporations and tax breaks to the wealthiest few. I'm a technical college teacher in the trades and a union member. I also have experience in local government as a county board supervisor. I believe in government as a public service, not as a means to political power, status, or lobbyist money. In fact, I think extreme partisanship is bad for us all, and I intend to work respectfully across the partisan aisle in Madison to respond to the needs of all of my constituents, whether they be Democrats or Republicans. I love our nation's democracy, and I'm concerned about losing it as legislatures across the country, including in Wisconsin, gerrymander voting districts and attempt to restrict voting access, which I will fight to protect and expand. I also love all my amazing children and grandchildren, some of them which are here, and I want them to grow up with at least as many rights and freedoms as I had. I will do everything I can to protect our eroding freedoms, including protecting reproductive rights, freedom to marry anyone we choose, and freedom to access contraceptives. I look forward to promoting a new era of authentic public service in our state legislature. I intend to bring everything I've got to respond to and act in the best interest of my small town and rural constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. That concludes the opening statements, and now it's time for questions from the audience. And If you could please identify yourself and where you're from, and please be concise in terms of questioning. The first question directed to
Mr. Plummer.
Teresa Valencia.
Oh, I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Plummer.
Okay, well, the order is we alternate, and the first
Well, then
question goes to
I will
Teresa.
wait until I get a question. Get
Okay,
time from
you can
Mr.
ask
Plummer.
subsequent, ma'am. They will both answer the same question, just so everybody knows this, but we're going to the order changes each time. So the first question directed to Teresa.
My name is Patty Herman. I live in Lodi. My question is, what actions would you take to establish a nonpartisan redistricting process in Wisconsin?
Thank you for the question. First of all, you need to have the legislature have the will to want to create that nonpartisan map committee, and I would definitely have that will to create that. I think we need a free and fair democracy, and gerrymandered maps will never give us free and fair democracy. We will never be represented in our legislature when they know they're going to win every time, and they know they do not have to follow anything that we actually want them to do. So I had a really good note about it. So anyways, there are things, there's 70% of Wisconsinites, actually 80% of Wisconsinites who believe we should have some access to abortion, but they don't have to listen to anything we say. They gabble in and gabble out in a 15-second session and don't even discuss it. The $1.6 billion that's sitting out there for us for our Medicaid expansion, why would we not take that to help the Wisconsin residents? It makes no sense to me, but they don't have to with the gerrymandered maps. So I would push very hard to try and get these maps drawn in a fair way. I have some areas on my map that are like little islands that I know that they drew them in there to make sure that a Democrat, well, they think they made sure that a Democrat could never win in this space, but a Democrat can.
Thank you. John?
Thanks, Bill. So current state law requires that the legislature redraw the district maps, both legislatively and Congress, every 10 years. We're all aware of that. So 2022 was that year. And so what happened was that we were charged with drawing new maps, which the governor vetoed. We passed them in the legislature, and the governor vetoed. At the same time, the governor had put together the Fair Maps Commission with members that he handpicked, and I was actually quite hopeful to see what they would come up with, because it was a Fair Maps Commission. I think, well, let's see what we get. Maybe this is something we can work with. When the Fair Maps Commission released their maps, they were so bad, so gerrymandered, that the Democrats in the legislature wouldn't even introduce them on the floor. So we did. So we introduced them the same day we introduced ours, and 17 Democrats voted against them. So, you know, I hear a lot about fair this and fair that, but when the governor had a chance to create fair maps, he didn't either. So there was a bill circulating this session that would have done that. The minority leader was not able to get it to the floor. I said I would have voted for it, but I hadn't read it. I would have had to read it first. But it never made it to the floor, and so it's hard to vote on a bill that doesn't get to the floor.
Thank you. Next question directed initially to John Plummer. Fine.
Thank you.
And identify yourself,
My name
please.
is Joan Zavril, and I live in the town of Lodi.
Thank you, Joan.
On the October 7th response to questions by the Wisconsin State Journal, Mr. Plummer said he was unable to commit to any exceptions for reproductive health. No exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. I want to ask Mr. Plummer, does he understand what an ectopic pregnancy does to a pregnant mother? Do you understand what a premature rupture of the membranes at 15 weeks does to the mother? And what is your response to those?
Well, I do understand that, and according to the attorney that I talked to about this, that would not even be illegal under the current law. So here's what I said to the State Journal, Joan. I said that I will not commit to a bill I haven't read. I'm not Nancy Pelosi. I will never pass a bill to see what's in it. So I haven't seen a specific bill on exemptions. I am certainly open to exemptions. I have 4 daughters. Certainly the life of the mother, and on, I will never apologize for protecting human life, but I am certainly open to exemptions. Here's the thing that going into the next session, we'll find out. The Republican Party has a huge tent with members with all kinds of different opinions on the subject. So we're going to have to talk about this in caucus and find out where are we as a caucus and what kind of legislation, if any, do we want to put forward to it. I never said I was against exemptions. I'm sorry you misread it that way.
I did not misread it. You said.
Thank you,
I'm
Joan.
sorry. Yeah, I didn't know this was an argument.
Let's be clear. We ask questions and we don't have a dialogue then, please. Teresa, you have 90 seconds on the same issue.
My Republican friends believe in small government, and many of them are confused at this Republican leadership manipulation of the Supreme Court appointees to overturn Roe v. Wade, as I'm sure we're all surprised. That Supreme Court decision this June led directly to the government moving into our bedrooms and doctors' offices. The Dobbs decision removed their formerly held constitutional implied right to privacy that has been used to prevent states from prohibiting abortion. That same constitutional right has been used to prevent states from prohibiting same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, and access to contraceptives. All of these freedoms, not just abortion, are now under threat. Furthermore, although Dobbs claimed to be returning the decision-making about abortion to the states, our Republican federal representatives are already planning a national abortion ban. And when Governor Evers called a special session for a referendum that would have allowed us, the people, to vote on women's choice, our legislature gavelled in that special session and back out in 15 seconds. I've lived through this decision-making process, just like Joan was discussing. My own life would have been on the line. I had a miscarriage at 16 weeks. The baby's heart stopped beating, and I needed to have a procedure called an abortion. I am pro-life. I have 5 children. I also believe that a woman has a right to choose and that she has control over her own body, not the government.
Thank you. Next question directed initially to Teresa Valencia.
I'm Sean Seidler from West Point, which is a township of Lodi. But I'm wondering, why was Roe v. Wade overturned in the first place?
Teresa?
So Roe v. Wade has really been looked at for a long time to try to be overturned, and I believe with the justices the Supreme Court justices that were put in, the radical judges were specifically put in there to overturn Roe v. Wade, and they did it because, in my opinion, they don't respect women, number one. 50% of us are women, and 50% of us should have a say in what we do over our own bodies. We should not be second-class citizens. And whether it was for their notoriety, whether it's something that they firmly believe, it's fine. They don't have to have an abortion. It's up to us how we treat our bodies and what we do with our bodies. So their decision was just radical, and to me, there was no reason to have it overturned.
John?
Thanks. So when I hear radical, I think justices who uphold the rule of law, which I guess could be viewed as radical, but I always thought it was bad law, not just because I'm pro-life, but I just thought that the Supreme Court in 1973 had no business to make that ruling, and it should have always been states' rights. the question I have, and I'm hoping some of you are asking this question as well, is the numerous times in the last 49 years that the Democrats had both the White House and both houses of Congress, why in the world did they not codify Roe versus Wade into federal law and end this debate entirely? But they never did, including the last 2 years when Joe Biden has both houses of Congress as well. But now he's talking about it. But why haven't they done it up till now if it was that important of an issue to them? That would be a question I'd be asking if you're sitting there wondering that why this is still a debate.
Thank you. Next question directed initially to John Plummer.
Hi, my name is Adam Steinberg from Lodi. Earlier this year, the state legislature passed a law to allow 18-year-olds to concealed carry handguns on school property. It was vetoed by Tony Evers, but Tim Michaels said that he would support those vetoes if they came back. So my question is to both candidates, do you support 18-year-olds concealed carry guns in school?
Well, I absolutely support 18-year-olds being able to conceal carry. They can vote. They can go off to war. They should be able to exercise their constitutional rights to conceal carry.
Teresa?
So, no, I do not believe they should be able to carry a concealed weapon. They can't get an abortion and they can't drink a beer, but they can have concealed carry. I barely like my 18-year-olds to drive the car. It scares me every time they go out. I have Life 360 on my phone. Gun safety is one of my biggest fears. If something terrible or horrific happened to our children in school, Mr. Plummer didn't feel safe enough to come here, but we send our children here every day. It happens all over the country. Every day in America, 110 people are killed by gun violence. 200 more are shot and wounded. That's why I support reasonable gun safety measures. Other countries, Australia, New Zealand, Norway, Japan, Britain, have implemented reasonable restrictions. We have 100,000 12 gun deaths per 100,000. Australia has less than 1. Those reasonable their reasonable gun legislation works. We're a nation of gun owners and hunters, including my own family, but Americans agree on certain reasonable measures. My opponent voted in February to exempt Wisconsin from federal firearm laws. So if there is any kind of federal law that comes down, we won't have it in Wisconsin if that had gone through. I do not believe we should have semi-automatic weapons on our streets. I do not believe that kids especially should have them. I don't think we should outgun our police ever.
Thank you. Next question directed initially to Teresa.
Hi, my name is Alana Moen. I live in Lodi. You said that you would protect the right to marry same sex. How would you do that?
Am I first? I can't
Teresa?
Thank you. So, first of all, we need people in our legislature who are willing to vote for this. There are many in there who do not believe that in same-sex marriage. I 100% do believe in it. So I would protect it in any way I could. I would fight hard. I'm a fighter. I never give up. I do what's right. I try very hard to do what's right on a daily basis. And any legislation that I could put forward that would protect that right, I would put forward. And it would be right in there with women's health, the right to marry who you want, and contraceptives, and interracial marriage, which was also protected by Dobbs.
John?
So same-sex marriage is currently legal in the United States and in the state of Wisconsin. So I'm not sure why this is an issue, but once again, if it's something that people feel strongly about, there's no question that the federal government could certainly, right now, codify that into federal law.
Next question directed first to John Plummer.
Paul Fisk, City of Lodi. The last at least two legislative sessions, there's been legislation introduced to reduce the threshold for disabled veterans and surviving spouses property tax credit from 100% disability to 70% disability. Do you support this? And if so, why? Or if you oppose it, why?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand. Is that Paul? Paul, you know how I feel about our veterans. I support everything that's good for them. I don't know how we don't go out of our way to support our veterans that have gone off to protect our freedoms for this great country. So you and I have talked countless times about these bills that have been brought forth by veterans, and I've been supportive of every single one of them.
Teresa?
So I know there's been bills brought forward that actually have not either been voted on or did not pass, and I don't understand how that can happen. I think we really need to support our veterans. We have too many homeless veterans. We have, if 70% of the threshold of the poverty level helps relieve their income tax, why would we not do that? It doesn't make any sense. When you have so many homeless veterans, you need to get down to why we have the homeless veterans. And if paying their property taxes is something that puts them on the streets, it should be a no-brainer that we would fund that. We should roll out the red carpet for our veterans, and they should be given everything that this country has to offer. The wealthiest nation in the world should not be letting our veterans live on the streets, be hungry, be homeless, and have such a high rate of suicide.
Next question directed first to Teresa.
Carla Faust, Town of Lodi. First, John and Teresa, thank you for giving of your time and for running in this very important election. My question is simply to both of you. You are out knocking on doors, talking to people. I want to hear what you're hearing the top two issues are for us in our area for this election.
You're up, Teresa.
So one of the biggest issues last weekend when I was knocking that came up was IVF treatment, which is for infertility, and the fear that people have. One family has 2 children that were IVF babies, and they didn't know what to do with the embryos that they have, so they're working out of state with other states to take those embryos because the current laws that we have make it very difficult to complete the in vitro fertilization process, especially if more than one egg is put into the mom. So a lot of fear with that, which was interesting that I got 2 of them in one day that talked about the IVF. I never thought of it before. The Roe v. Wade definitely has come up a lot. Inflation has come up a lot. Our roads have come up a lot, which is interesting. I believe John is on the Transportation Committee, so Highway 113, I think out by Oki, I think it's 113. They would like that fixed. Let's see. I think those are kind of the top ones. People are, I know, kind of frustrated with the way things have been going, and they would like to see some things different, and I will bring that difference.
John?
Well, thanks, Bill. So early next week, I should go over 4,000 doors for this election, and I knock every door myself. I don't have a staff. I don't have volunteers. I don't have a crew. I knock every door myself, and I will tell you, without hesitation, the number one issue coming up at these doors is the cost of living. So the massive deficit spending in Washington is driving the average American working family over the cliff in gas prices, groceries, everything we buy is outrageously going up. The CPI has spiked under Joe Biden the last 2 years, and people are struggling, and especially the seniors. So I can't tell you how many seniors I've stood on the front doorstep with talking to. They don't know if they can stay in their homes. That's not right. So the Democrats have spent us into a disastrous economy right now, and whether or not they like it, we're in a recession. So when you have 2 consecutive quarters of down growth, that's a recession. They can call it anything they want. So that and crime are the 2 issues that are coming up at the doors with me. And, inflation is driven by the federal spending that's going on in Washington, and it needs to stop. And Governor Evers needs to stop releasing convicted criminals, including child rapists, before their terms are up. The streets are not safe the way it is.
Thank you, John. Next question directed first to John Plummer.
I'm Sam Klepper from Lodi, and you spoke on the increased cost of living. What solutions would you pose to lower the cost of living, or even help people who are struggling with the cost of living?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and so, like I said, so much of it is driven by federal misspending. We did not need that last $1.9 trillion stimulus package that Biden passed right after he took office, and that's really what drove the inflation up. So the housing market's going to start to slow down, as it has already. We are headed in, I think next year is going to be really tough. So the states, there isn't a lot the state can do. The one thing I think we should need to continue here in Wisconsin is lower our taxes. We've got a budget surplus, and we need to pass, in my estimation, another healthy tax cut for our taxpayers here in the state of Wisconsin. I'd also like to finally eliminate personal property taxes here in Wisconsin. So we've done a great job, and that's why we have a surplus. And thank God we have a rainy day fund, because unfortunately I think we're going to need it the next couple of budgets.
Teresa?
So inflation is a worldwide thing right now, and it is not from the spending in our capital. If it was, maybe the 1.9 trillion tax break that was given to the wealthiest by the federal government under the previous administration, they didn't seem to complain about that. The inflation that we have right now, primarily, gas prices. OPEC says our prices are not high enough, so they've cut how much they are producing, so our prices can go higher. Supply and demand isn't necessarily in play on that when we have enough supply. They just won't put it out there. They have record profits, and we need to have a windfall tax on them. We need to get some of that money back to us. All the other countries have a windfall tax, and we're basically subsidizing the other countries because they're getting all the money that we're paying. That $5 billion could go a long way, the surplus in Wisconsin, to help with inflation for middle and lower class people. I do not understand this correlation that they keep talking about with the inflation and the spending, because it's proven. You can look historically, Democrat presidents spend less in their administration than Republican throughout history.
Thank you. Next question directed to Teresa initially.
I'm Bill Welch. I live in Lodi. I've always thought that one of the answers to democracy's problems is more democracy, not less. So I would like to know what you all would do to increase voter participation.
You're up, Teresa.
Okay, so first of all, I'd put ballot boxes back. I would look at a lot of other states and a lot of other countries who have much higher participation than we do. I would like to have the maximum amount of participation. I'm not afraid of, I don't know what the fear is, too many people voting. I'm not afraid of that. The more people who vote, the more people who are invested in what we're doing in our democracy, the better our society will be. I have never figured out the $1 million that was wasted on this sham and fraud of our election. You know, people that are sitting here are our poll workers, they're our friends, they're our neighbors. There is nothing going on that is so horrible that we need to reduce the amount of voting. So if we need to find a way, you know, we already have, everybody has to register, everybody has to have proof of identification. We find almost no fraud ever, every single election in Wisconsin. So whatever this made-up thing is, it's just to keep more people from voting at the voting booth, which I don't understand. I really think we need to find ways, and this should be 100% nonpartisan. Both sides should want the maximum participation.
John?
And I do. I'd love to see 100% participation on voting day, and I think you could tell by the turnout. You know, in our case, that the town and the city of Lodi has been great the last few elections, and I think Jan could testify to that. I don't know anybody personally that wants to suppress voting. The conversation isn't about suppression; it's about legal votes. So there were issues in the last election. Is Joe Biden the president? Yes, Joe Biden is the president. But there were issues in the last election that are questionable at best and maybe illegal, including Democracy in the Park, when they set up with duffel bags in 206 city parks in Madison and collected ballots. That's not legal. And it was funded by out-of-state money. Why are we accepting out-of-state money to run our elections? That's not necessary, and it's not I don't know that it's legal, and it certainly shouldn't be. So I don't know anybody personally that wants to suppress the votes. I love voter ID. I'm glad to hear that Teresa's in favor of it. I know a lot of people weren't, but it sounds like the Democrats are coming around on that too. So I'd love to see 100% participation in our elections.
Thank you, John. Next question directed initially to John Plummer.
My name's Jeff Leckwey. I live in Lodi, in the city of Lodi. I have a question about availability and accessibility to health care in rural Wisconsin, understanding that there's counties within the district that I believe don't have a hospital in them. What would you do to change that scenario or improve that situation?
Well, that's a great question, Jeff, because the 42nd is a very rural district. As the previous chair of the Substance Abuse Committee, the obstacles to all health care, but in that case, in the substance treatment, became glaring, including transportation and housing. So we're pretty fortunate here in Wisconsin. We have excellent health care. I've been very closely working with John Russell over in Columbus at Prairie Health, and they have a great network. So I know there are pockets up in northern Wisconsin that are an issue, but we've been very supportive of the healthcare industry here in Wisconsin in the Republican caucus.
Teresa.
So healthcare in Columbia County, I know it's going to be, some of it's going to be cut in the county budget coming up for Health and Human Services. Columbia County is the biggest one in the Assembly District. We have one primary care physician for every 2,200 residents, which is about half national average. Dental care is even worse. We do not have hardly any mental health services. It can take months and months. My niece's mother committed suicide, and it took 5 months for her to get in to see a pediatric counselor. It was horrific. Our healthcare is not doing well, and it's getting worse. The Medicaid expansion, I would love, love, love to hear an explanation of why we cannot take my tax dollars that I paid in, that the federal government wants to give to our state, and all of you paid in, why we cannot use that money within our state to help with these services. It could help with the opioid problem. It could help with the mental health issues. It could help with our veterans. There are so many things that it could help with, and it's our money, and we've been turning it away. No, the current legislature has been turning it away for years. We need that money. We need to get it out to the people who need it.
Thank you. Teresa, next question directed to you initially.
Alrighty. I'm Lily Callahan. I live in Oak Key, and I'm a senior at the high school. But my question is, speaking of the money for our healthcare and mental health services, where are you trying to get this money from, and what services are you going to take it out of, and then how is that going to affect the other areas where you're taking the money from?
I don't want to take the money from anywhere. I don't know where else we could cut the budget on these things. There's money already available, $1.6 billion, that our Republican legislature refuses to accept from the federal government. I don't know why, but I think that $1.6 billion would go a very long way for these services. If we are going to be a society that cares about each other, shouldn't we be taking care of everyone? Why are we leaving some people behind? Why are we saying some people are not worthy of getting health care and we don't give them access? Mental health, so many mental health problems, and you know what our treatment is for them? Put them in jail. Just put them in jail and leave them there, and then let them out when their time's up, and then put them in jail again. That is not mental health services. It's cruel and inhuman punishment. It makes no sense to me. We could do better as a society. We need to make it a priority. That's the biggest thing. If we don't make it a priority, it's never going to happen. For me, it is a priority.
Thank you, Teresa. John?
Well, that's a lot to unpack. So I don't think there's any question we're going to have a discussion next session on levy limits that apply to both the county and municipal budgets. With the inflation caused by deficit spending in Washington, the municipalities and the counties are really struggling to make their budgets fit. So there may have to be some adjustment to those levy limits just so they can maintain services. As far as Teresa keeps bringing up the expansion, what that expands is welfare. So we have Badger Care covers everybody at 100% of poverty and below, and then above that is covered by the Affordable Care Act, which was passed by Barack Obama and offers discounted health care programs to everybody above 100% of the poverty level. So nobody's falling through the cracks. If they're not insured, it's because they choose not to be insured. But those policies, and I've heard as low as $12 a month with subsidies. So there's no gap there on health care coverage. I have no interest in expanding welfare here in the state of Wisconsin, especially with the number of jobs that are available to people. I see people begging for money on the street corner in Madison, and I'm thinking right there is a help wanted sign. Walk across the street and fill out an application.
Next question directed first to John Plummer.
My name is Tim Anthon. I'm a senior at Lodi High School. There has been moves in states such as Tennessee and Virginia to restrict irreversible transgender reassignment surgery for minors. What is your guys' view on that?
Well, I have not heard any conversations in Madison about this whatsoever. I don't think it has any traction, but I will tell you, you talk about somebody at that age making that life-altering decision and having that surgery. I think that's something that, I've never had to go through that, and I'm sure it's a very uncomfortable place to be in your life. But I think at that age, to have something that's basically irreversible, I just think, I hope somebody's counseling these young people. It's tough to be youth right now anyway, coming out of COVID. You know, we run a karate school. We deal with children all the time. I have never seen this level of anxiety in our youth, ever. So they are suffering. They're absolutely suffering. And we're doing everything we can at our karate school to help them navigate life. But it's a tough time to be a teenager.
Teresa?
So this is a tough one, and I agree with John on many of the things that he said on this one. It is a tough time to be youth. I agree with that completely. It would be even tougher time to want this surgery and not be able to get it. I think we need to always protect our children to make sure that they're in a safe environment and that they are getting counseling or mental health services that they need, which is not happening in Wisconsin, so they'd have to wait a long time. But I think it should be between the family and their doctor. Again, this is keep the government out of people's personal lives and let them make these decisions that they need to make with the people that they need to make them with. I don't think they need me as an assembly person determining if they need or want this surgery or not. For me, it's just a matter of staying out of it. It's the privacy of the person and the family. And I don't have enough personal experience in it to make a decision, but certainly the family and the young person does.
Next question directed initially to Teresa.
Hi, Tess Carr, Town of Lodi. I have a two-part question on education. First, I know that the previous governor's administration in Wisconsin cut our public education funding by approximately $1 billion and then had to restore some of that, but it is still not up to the level of public education funding we had before the Walker administration did that. And also cut, I think, $250 million from the University of Wisconsin public university budget and removed certain funding from preschool as well. So I have concerns about that and about our school voucher program in this state, which I feel removes funding from public education. I would like to know how you feel about how our public schools are funded and how we can improve that. And the second part of my question is, how do you feel about the student loan forgiveness program that was just announced and is being administered at the federal level? Thank you.
You're first, Teresa.
I think that should be a 3-minute answer because it's 2 questions, so.
Sorry, kid.
So I believe in public education 100%. I have a public education, all 5 of my children, and my bonus Ryan child back there, he also is getting a public education. My daughter is a first grade teacher in Rio. I strongly believe in public education, and anything that erodes that public education I am completely against. The vouchers and the voucher schools, I have always been 100% against. I do not want my tax dollars going anywhere except into public education. If someone wants to send their child to a private school, I'm all for it. I have nothing against it. You just have to pay for it. I don't want to pay for it. It only takes money from our public schools, and that has been part of the largest shortfall that we've been having within our public schools. So I am not for the voucher program, and I know the legislature passed to increase that voucher system by an immense amount, but thank goodness it was vetoed by Governor Evers. I just think that it's a bad idea, and I want to invest in our public schools. I want to invest in my children and all of your children, and we need to keep that money within the public schools.
John?
Yeah, that definitely should be a 3-minute answer. So And I couldn't quite understand Tess, but I'm thinking what she's talking about was when the 2009-2010 biennial budget, Jim Doyle / public education spending during the downturn in the economy. That's when the cuts were first made, and the subsequent administration was plagued with playing catch up for the next 8 years. And so for the last 4 years, all I've heard from educators is we need to get back to 2/3 funding. And I totally agree with that, which we did this budget. So we were able to finally get back to where we were. We spend a record amount of money on public education, which I also believe in. I have 2 daughters who are teachers. So my concerns are that during COVID, with the parents who wanted their kids in school or they didn't want them to be wearing masks, we're basically told to just sit down and be quiet by too many school boards in the state. And so I've had parents come to me who are in favor of universal school choice, which I've never heard before. I've never heard that from the average parent before. So they've got some damage control to take care of. I'm a big fan of school choice the way it is because I've had some of these students in my office from the Milwaukee area who are in tears that they're the first kids to graduate from high school and go to college in their families.
Thank you. We have time for one more audience question before closing statements. The last question directed first to John Plummer.
Hi, I'm Adia Bonifield. I'm a senior and I live in Lodi. I was wondering what your opinions are on lowering the voting age from 18 to 16.
Yeah, no, I don't support that.
Okay. Teresa?
Wow. Okay. I have not looked into this. I've heard rumors of this. I'd be a little leery to let my 16-year-olds vote, I think, although mine are probably more informed than a lot of 16-year-olds. I think it probably has some good sides to it and some bad ones. If we could get greater voter participation and get young people excited to go out and vote, I think it could have some positive effects, so I wouldn't be completely against it. But I would have to see some data where it was done somewhere else, what the advantages and disadvantages would be for that. I can't say that I'm completely against it because I don't have enough data to look at it one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to the audience for your excellent questions. And we are now at the portion of the forum for our closing statements. John Plummer gave the opening statement initially, and Teresa Valencia, would you please give us your closing statement first, please? Thank you.
Yes. I've talked about ways to make life better for all of us in District 42. In contrast, my opponent has voted in complete lockstep with the Assembly partisan leadership, and our current leadership is so misaligned with our values that there's very little they can talk about. Instead, they distract with complaints about inflation, gas prices, so-called open borders, supposedly leading to unprecedented crime in our community, which I have not witnessed. But as I've discussed, these distractions are often far from the reality, nor do they offer solutions. Midterm elections are often a referendum on the party in power, but this time's different. The Supreme Court has been captured by radical activist judges, and for the first time in our nation's history is overturning its own precedent to take back instead of give freedoms to American citizens. Second, current Wisconsin legislature leadership has abandoned its job to represent us, like refusing to simply accept the 1.6 federal Medicaid dollars, which is not welfare, to help citizens in the state. Like, even though over 80% support reasonable access to abortion, the legislature gavelled in and gavelled out. 70% of Wisconsin want fair voting map. Our legislature this year passed the most gerrymandered maps we've ever had. Even though we held free and fair, transparent, and incredibly run 2020 election, the Assembly wasted over $1 million. And I'm wondering how many more millions does it cost to find that fraud that John mentioned. So $1 million on that sham fraud election investigation that produced absolutely nothing but voter doubt. And like, although our Assembly Treasury has $5 billion surplus, our legislature has failed to adequately fund our public schools. We expect our representatives to remember that public service work means working for the best interests of the residents. We expect our lawmakers to prioritize people over party. I won't forget my job is to represent us, and I hope you'll vote Valencia.
Thank you, Teresa. John, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Well, I feel bad I don't have a prepared statement to read, Bill, but I'm gonna shoot from the hip here. So I want to thank especially the students for attending this today. I think it's important that you guys witness democracy firsthand, and I love the questions you brought up. I also want to thank Teresa for running, because I have mad respect for anybody who is willing to put their name on a ballot these days. It's not always the most positive atmosphere. So I want to also congratulate her on running a positive campaign so far. I love my job. I love working with the people that I work with. I can tell you without hesitation that if you poll the Democrats in the state assembly in Madison, not one of them will call me abrasive. I treat them with respect. We get along personally. We disagree on policy. That's our job. But I will never be one of those people that, whether it's on social media or in person, is abrasive. It's just not in my DNA. I would love to continue to represent you in Madison. I disagree with my opponent on many issues, but I think one thing we have in common is we both care about the 42nd, we care about our communities, and we're running because we want to make a difference. So I congratulate her on that. I'd love to have your vote on November 8th. And continue to work for you in Madison. God bless you.
Thank you, John. And let's give a round of applause to our two candidates. We'd like to thank Teresa Valencia and John Plummer for appearing today at the forum. And as we always do, we also commend them for their willingness to serve and to meet with the public. So thank you to both very sincerely for your contribution to public service. I would remind everyone that if you would like to see this video of this, I understand Mr. Potter is going to be putting it on the Optimist YouTube channel, so it will be available to be visited there. Again, thank you to everyone at the school. Thanks to the teachers for your interest and for all the students for your participation, and that concludes today's forum.